I'm Carol Gaskell. I'm CEO of Full Potential Group. I've been coaching for about 25 years, and one of my real passions is coaching teams. So very excited today to be talking to you about coaching teams that thrive. And let's face it, we've all had quite a challenging couple of years, and many teams are on the brink of really reinventing themselves. So I think this is a unique opportunity for us as coaches to really support teams, to help them come into a new level of being as we move forward in the years to come. And what we're going to be talking about today, and I'm going to be sharing in this science side of Converge, is how you can map motivational team dynamics to really start to put some science behind helping teams to totally excel. And what we're going to cover in this session, I'm going to talk in general about some best practice for coaching thriving teams. And then I'm going to zone in on 4 key characteristics that make a significant difference to teams that are outstanding versus teams that are a little bit more mediocre. Once we've gone through those 4 characteristics, I'm going to weave a thread through this of how you can use measuring and mapping and evaluating people's 9 intrinsic motivators to really support team performance and productivity, but also help the well-being of the team. So these are the 3 main segments of this session. So let's get going. Now, there are so many challenges facing teams, and I'm sure many of you in this session, and I am listening, and I'll fill in the chat box if anyone's got any questions or queries as you go along. But certainly the teams that I've been working with over the last 2 years have got conflicting challenges. Some are actually working extremely hard and doing extremely well, and are so busy that it's trying to sort of keep track of progress and onboarding new people all the time. Other teams have restructured, they've lost team members, they're trying to manage in a leaner business model. There's collaboration issues. Many teams now are working in a hybrid way. Some people are in an office or in a workplace, some people are remote, and that's creating some interesting conflict communication issues. People are frustrated. Definitely issues on well-being and different times that people are zooming in and out of team communication. So there's all sorts of fascinating things going on in this new world. And I think this is where coaches have got a real opportunity to make a difference and support teams in this space. There are some great bodies of work already existing around team coaching and supporting teams. And Peter Hawkins, definitely some great tools and models in his leadership team coaching book, which I highly recommend and use when I'm helping coaches support teams that thrive. And I also really love Georgina Woostra's new book, Mastering the Art of Team Coaching. She uses lots of tools and techniques and some great models to take teams on a journey to support them. And again, I think there's some really good insights for team coaches. And obviously, I couldn't end these book recommendations without talking about the great Patrick Lencioni and the 5 dysfunctions of a team. Many of you will be familiar with that. And I think definitely the issues around building trust, having constructive conflict, and all those great things that Lencioni talks about are really valuable to help teams thrive. And I think Lencioni's idea of creating cohesive teams has definitely been a big theme for me in the last year. So there's some great bodies of work already out there that we can all draw on. And given that, just thinking about teams that you're involved with at the moment, or thinking of a significant team that you're a part of, I'm just curious for you to maybe put in the chat box, how much of your current team's potential do you think is being activated right now? You know, how much of your team's potential is really being activated? Now, some teams, you might put a percentage in there. Some teams are feeling like they're all guns blazing and they're pushing all the boundaries, and they're sort of probably 80-90% activating, 80-90% productive. And I would say they're in the optimal zone. And when we're looking at mapping team motivation and team productivity, my goal is to help as many teams as possible get into that 80% or more zone, where we're looking at how do they sustain those high levels of vibrancy, if you like. But in reality, I think with what's happened to everybody over the last couple of years, I'm finding that a lot of teams are coming out at less than 60% productive or 60% motivated. And there's a real opportunity here to help peel back and start teams analysing what's holding them back and how they can start to move forward. So the interesting thing here is that if you're a team leader and you're hugely motivated, but you have a team that you feel you're trying to pull along, but they're not being as motivated as you, is what can you do? And I think as a team coach, supporting the team leader as well as supporting the team and holding that energy for everybody to thrive is super critical. So how much of that team's energy and potential is currently being used? I think from my experience, I would say that most teams can activate at least another 30% of their potential. And it's one thing saying it, but what I like about what I'm going to talk about now, and the reason it's in the science stream, is we can actually measure and map it. Now, a lot of businesses are very keen on looking at the return on investment for anything that they do with their people. And so being able to justify and show trends and actually show evidence and the numbers that support this can be incredibly helpful and valuable. And I think we tend to get what we measure if we measure what we want. So looking at measuring engagement, measuring motivation and productivity, I think is a real key to helping teams thrive. So if you want thriving performance and we want to be in that excellent zone of a good 80% motivated, yes, we need teams that are highly skilled. And a lot of us will spend time providing tools and techniques and coaching people to build their skills and capability and helping them seize the opportunities that are facing them. But you could have the most skilled team in the world with really clear opportunities, a really good business strategy. But if people aren't motivated and there's no fuel in the tank, it's really hard for the team to thrive. And what I've noticed recently is a lot of teams feel like they're running up a downward escalator. You know, they've got a vision, they know where they're trying to get to, but things feel quite difficult. And as a coach, part of our opportunity is how do we help them see what they're doing and how do we help them remove the barriers so that they can perform exceptionally well and equally enhance their well-being in the process. So this is quite interesting. If we start with some numbers here. Productivity is a real buzzword for many of the organisations that we've been working in recently. And lots of people are looking at how do we increase the productivity of our teams. And what we found, especially over the pandemic and teams being in lockdown and people having to work from home or the hybrid working, that many managers and team leaders are a bit worried about this presenteeism. People might be checking in and in theory they're at work, whether it's physical workplace or whether it's at home, but are they really there? Are they looking at Facebook? Is this presenteeism where they don't really want to be there? How much work are they doing? And I think certainly at the beginning of the pandemic, I think many leaders and managers were a little bit skeptical, sort of looking over their shoulder around how do I know that I can trust that my people are delivering? And I think this has become an ongoing theme around how many people are actually present but not actually delivering. And as you can see there, we've got very low productivity. Then we've got in that middle band of teams, they're turning up, they're getting on with what needs to be done, and they've got a sort of average level of productivity. But what becomes really interesting on these figures is that once a team starts to move beyond 75% motivation, their productivity increases exponentially. And this is a sweet spot for us coaches in terms of if we're really going to support teams to be unstoppable and to do exceptionally well, one of the first things we can do is help them understand their motivation and help them look at how they can get into that 75%, 80% plus, so they're really high performing. And this is the whole theme for this session today. So, what are the 4 main factors that can make a significant difference to a team that's going to thrive, and how can we as coaches support them? I know there are lots of great tools and models, but the one I want to share today has got 4 key elements. So the key for many teams is to have a really clear purpose, mission and objectives, and that ambitious remit. How many teams do you know have got a truly ambitious remit? I was working with a group of CEOs this afternoon, and I got them to rate how many of them felt they had an ambitious remit. And only about 30% of CEOs felt that they were really clear on their purpose and mission, and that the remit was compelling enough for teams to really want to follow it. So that's the first part that we're going to talk about in this session. And then secondly, once there's a clear remit and people are really galvanized around a purpose and a mission, the next aspect is looking at the interdependency of the team. How much trust is there? What levels of collaboration are going on? Is there a real sense of belonging in the team? And again, this is an area that I've noticed many of the pieces of work we've been doing have linked into this whole interdependency. We'd like our team to be more cohesive. And I think especially many teams have been feeling quite fragmented over recent times, and people ended up working in silos, whether intentionally or not. And so this need for independency and interdependency is really critical. So I'm going to talk about that. And then belief, critical. You know, it's one thing, what's the team doing, but it's also who are they being? And what do they believe about themselves, about their team members, about their team leader, about their vision, mission, what they're here to do? How positive are they? What are their expectations for the future? How optimistic are they? And I think that's a critical thing for us to work on as coaches to support teams to really thrive. And then the final one I'm going to cover today is accountability. Super critical. You've got your ambitious remit, you've got your vision and purpose, you've got everyone collaborating and being cohesive with that interdependency. There's a strong belief and a passion around what everyone's doing. And then it's holding people accountable for the results, individual results, but very importantly, those collective results and that joint remit of what they're doing, and that there's coherence between everybody and everyone's really satisfied. So those are the 4 elements that we're going to consider today. And for me, the real silver bullet that sits in the middle of that is motivation. Because if everybody knows what motivates them and they're all fired up, that feeds straight into the purpose and the mission. If everyone understands their motivators, it feeds straight into interdependency, building trust and collaboration, and that sense of belonging and connection. Equally, if everyone's really motivated, they're more likely to feel positive about the future, have that optimism and that sense of belief. And when everyone's really motivated, they're much more likely to follow through and deliver on their results. The best companies at engaging and motivating people achieve 4.5 times the revenue growth. And individuals who are extremely motivated and engaged are 50% more likely to hit their performance targets. So there are some real business benefits to holding people accountable to deliver on all of this. So the body of work I'm going to draw on as we go through this webinar is all mapping motivation, which comes from a range of work by James Sale. Now, James has written 5 books, and some of you might have heard me speaking about some of this before. His Mapping Motivations for Top Performing Teams is his latest book. It's the 5th in the series. So he's got a first one, which is generally on motivation. He's got motivation and engagement, motivation and leadership, and also motivation and coaching. So they're all great books, but what I'm drawing on today is his body of work on motivation and teams. So as I've just talked about those 4 key elements, ambitious remit, interdependency, belief and accountability, you might want to put in the chat box, if you think of a team that's important to you, which one of those 4 elements, if you really focused and coached them on it, do you think would make the biggest difference to the team? If you were going to ignite more potential in your team, which one of those would you be focusing on right now? Now, I know it depends where the team is in the team cycle, but again, interestingly, different teams I've worked on have had different focus areas. And as a coach, we can work around all of these areas depending on what's needed by the team. So I've said that the silver bullet through all of this is motivation. So if we really start understanding motivation, ultimately what we're talking about is energy. So we're looking at how do we measure the energy of the team, the energy of individual team members, but also the energy of the collective group, the team. Now, the word motivation comes from the Anglo-Norman term motive, which means drive. So what we're really looking at here are the motivators being our inner drivers, or the team's intrinsic motivators. Because it's these intrinsic motivators that determine how people feel and also why they do what they do. And hence me putting motivation right in the crux of thriving teams, it's about starting with why. Understanding why the team gets out of bed in the morning and then putting that alignment through everything else. So if we understand the why of the team, it lends us really nicely to help them craft their purpose, get clear on their mission, and then start breaking that down into objectives and building out their ambitious remit. Now, many of you will be familiar with the work by Simon Sinek, and he talks about why and the golden circle, and the starting with why. And again, it's a great book that I work with many teams on if this is the area that's important to them. But Find Your Why gives a lot of tools and techniques in this book by Simon Sinek to really help people understand more about and taking teams through how they can understand their why. But one of the things to get right into that circle is the motivational map technique. And when I do this with teams, it will then help me get them to articulate their purpose. You know, I often ask before we've even started measuring and mapping the motivation, what really drives this team? Why do you exist? And what does your work really serve, and who does your work serve? And a great challenge to ask teams is, you know, what do you do uniquely as a team that the world of tomorrow needs? It's a great brainstorming session that you can use from a coaching perspective to facilitate that. Asking the team, what's effortless for you, or what gets you in the flow? All of these questions are great to help the team start to elicit the purpose and then start building out the team charter. And to help teams do this and to give them some numbers behind some of these sort of intuitive feelings around what their purpose is and what their why is, I use mapping motivation. Now, some of you might be familiar with this whole concept that was created by James Sale, but some teams and some people get out of bed in the morning because of the relationships. It's their team members, the people they meet, the communities they serve, their clients or the customers that they're there to make a difference to. But it's very much that sense of relationships and belonging. Other teams, it's less about the relationships. The thing that excites them and fires them up is a sense of achievement. You know, it's having a joint goal that they're all aiming for. It's hitting their KPIs and their targets. It's getting projects over the line. It's ticking off their to-do lists. And it's feeling like they're moving forward and making progress on the things that they've agreed to. For other teams, they're actually motivated by what we call growth. And what I mean by growth is it's very much about what could be possible. What does the team want to grow? Now, they might have a great business idea or a great project that they really want to grow and develop. They might want to grow themselves and push themselves to new edges, and they might really want to make a difference and have an impact on the world. So what becomes interesting is thinking about what is it that's driving the team that you're coaching. But to sometimes understand what's driving the team that you're coaching is very much about thinking about what drives you as the coach. Because as we know, sometimes as a coach, we sort of hold up the mirror for the team that we're working with. So I'm going to share a little bit more understanding about these motivators to get you to think about, of these 9 motivators, which one's most important to you? Because we've got 3 relationship motivators, 3 achievement motivators, and 3 growth motivators. And you might be motivated by one motivator that sits in that relationship box. The defender likes safety, security, and predictability. The friend likes belonging, fulfilling relationships. The star likes recognition, social esteem, and to be respected. If the team or you have achievement motivators, you might have the director motivator. You like power and influence over people and resources. If you've got a team full of builders, then they will be the ones that want the money. The builders are most commercially orientated. They like above average satisfaction, material satisfactions, above average standard of living, and that sense of wealth building often. Often they're the most competitive teams with each other as well as externally with other teams or other businesses. The experts thrive on knowledge and mastery. Creators love innovating and being ahead of the curve and whatever it is they're doing. Spirits like a lot of freedom and independence, and the searchers like meaning and making a difference. I'm just going to play a short video to give you a sense of the motivators, and as the video is playing, you might want to start thinking, which of these motivators really resonates with me? Which one is likely to be my top intrinsic driver? Because that will influence how you coach. You might also want to think, as you're watching this, I wonder which is the top motivator of the team leader of the team I'm working with, or what's the top motivators collectively of the teams. So this next video gives you some insight into some of these 9 motivators. Now, if you've had a chance to put something in the chat box there, I may well have responded as we've gone through this, but I'm sharing my top 3 motivators. So my top 1 is searcher, and I imagine many of you may well have voted for searcher. Like me, meaning, making a difference, contributing and wanting to add value can be super important to you, and that's probably what gets you out of bed in the morning and why you're a coach. I'm finding that quite a few CEOs and senior teams have searcher in their blend of motivators. We like to be purposeful. Feedback is very important, but it's feedback about how we're making a difference, and quality is critical for us. My second motivator is the creator. So I love innovating. I like to be ahead of the curve. I like finding new things that are going to make the biggest difference to my client. Hence me really delighted to be talking about thriving teams and this great tool that you might be able to use with your teams. So very solution orientated and cutting edge. And I get really demotivated if I feel that either I'm not making a difference or what I'm doing is not leading edge or adding real value to the teams I'm working with. And my third motivator is the expert. I like bringing in insight. I love learning new things and spreading the knowledge too. What's quite interesting and maybe a bit shocking to some of you listening to this is my lowest motivator is the friend. Now, you think if we're in the people business that friend would be a high motivator, but actually you can be good at something, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's a motivator. And if I'm really honest, I can get quite energy drained by certain people, and that puts friend at the bottom of my list. I've got the friends that I'm really happy with, but what's more important for me is making a difference in the creativity and the expertise. So it's quite interesting to understand where you are, and equally to work with the leader of a team to help them understand what their motivators are and how that can start creating that leadership shadow across the team. So meaning and making a difference is a top motivator for me. It might be for you. And certainly for quite a lot of the teams I work with, this is their top motivator. If you work in the charity sector, probably won't surprise you to find many people with this as a motivator. I do quite a lot of work in service industries, and again, many teams have searcher as their top motivator. The creator, I also work in marketing and creative services, and it wouldn't surprise you that creator comes high. Digital marketing, there's a lot of creators in there. And the expert, I've noticed quite a lot of financial services business tend to have expert quite high in their motivators. But they're my top three. And again, being able to measure and map it is really helpful. So you can see on here that my search, my most important one, scores 35, and it's above that little pink line, which means it's a non-negotiable motivator for me. So any work I take on as a coach, I have to really feel I'm making a difference. But also, I want to bring my creativity in and be able to be innovative with the businesses that I'm working with. So I quite like working with entrepreneurial teams, because that's important to me. So understanding and measuring your own motivators, but equally being able to measure the motivators of the people you work with can be really helpful. Now, this is a team that I've worked with just recently. Now, they came out collectively as a team at 69% motivated. We call that the boost zone. My target for them is to get them to over 80% motivated if they're going to totally thrive. And what's interesting for them is their top motivator is searcher, so they want to make a difference. Their second one is spirit, so freedom and independence is really important to them. And the third one is the builder, so the commercial aspect. You know, for them, performance-related pay is really important. So once you get a sense of the team, you can start helping them craft their purpose and their vision and their mission. So this particular team was incredibly purposeful, very independent, but also very commercial. So those words, purposeful, independent, and commercial, became part of their values. And we started to build on that to help them create a purpose statement and then start to create a mission for the team. We can see here that their team risk index, their propensity for risk was a 6 out of 10. So they were okay with a bit of risk, but not too much. So I was very aware as a coach not to push them too far and push their boundaries too far. The spirit motivator that this team had, just going back, you can see their second motivator was actually causing quite a few issues in the team. The spirit is about freedom, independence, everybody making their own decisions. And especially as people have been working in a hybrid way and many people have been working from home, what had happened is there were lots of free spirits who enjoyed that freedom, working their own time, being quite flexible. But the challenge had been the team had actually lost their cohesion. And part of the remit for us when we were working with them is everyone was working in their own silos. There was no collective agenda. There was no sharing of what each other was doing. But also what the team members were finding is they were actually treading on each other's toes because they weren't sharing what they were doing. Sometimes one person would be doing the same piece of work as another person without even realizing it. So understanding this motivator and talking about this motivator shifted the team's ability to thrive because they really were not feeling independent. So helping them understand that, put clear boundaries in place and manage everyone's priorities was actually really important for this team and a critical part of coaching. The builder motivator, their third motivator, was also important. And at this point, this team did not have any performance-related pay structures in place. And as we worked with the team, it became really important that what they were actually motivated by was having really clear KPIs, holding each other to account, actually having a scoreboard and a dashboard where they could all track their progress and see how they were doing, because this team was incredibly competitive. As soon as we started tracking goals and putting the scoreboard in place, their results started to increase. So again, it was a really important part of the coaching to work with the team on that. So I've talked about understanding motivation at one level and how to start tracking and measuring it. And we've looked at how that can feed into the purpose and the mission and really understanding what the team's about. And so the second element I now want to look at is interdependency. And this is a big issue for lots of teams at the moment. And I suspect if you're coaching, you've probably been asked, how do I help this team build more trust again? How do we help them collaborate, build that sense of belonging? Some of you may well use personality profiling, and I've used it with the teams I've worked with for over 20 years. And, you know, whether you do use, I use Insights and Clarity 4D profiling. Some of you might use MBTI or DISC. There's lots of great tools out there. And that's definitely really helpful to support a team to understand each other and collaborate and communicate better. So it's definitely a lens to use. I also work a lot with neuroscience and neuroscience of the brain and helping people understand a brain adaptive approach, because agility and collaboration is super critical at the moment. So this is a really good book. If people are interested in this, you might want to see the resources that go with this webinar. But very much with neuroscience, what's fascinating is understanding that team members transfer energy between each other, and that whole process of transference has a direct impact between the team leader and the team, whether they're working together physically in a space together or whether they're working remotely. And it's quite interesting to build this ability to understand each other. And so whereas I found that profiling personalities and people understanding behaviors can help collaboration and cohesion, motivation has gone one step further for me. So it goes beyond the behaviors, beyond the personality, into actually what's driving those behaviors. So motivation can take the team to a slightly deeper level. And so when we're mapping a team's motivation, I've spoken about individual motivators, but we can actually create a dashboard of team members. So what I've put up here on this slide is, as a coach, when I've profiled a team, I can look at it and look at the bright pink ones are the person's top motivator. So I can see Nick, the person at the top, he's really motivated by freedom and having that spirit autonomy motivator. Whereas Tracy is totally at the other end of the spectrum. And for her, what's important is she wants friendship. Now, she's a little bit Billy No Mates, because nobody else on the team really finds the friendship important. And Tracy's the one that's trying to organise socials now the team's back together, and nobody else wants to do them. And it's really helped give an understanding of why the drivers are different. Equally, you can see Steve is very much an expert. Jack, it's about being safe with the defender. And then we've got Bex and Mike, who are like me, they've got strong searcher motivator. So again, you can start to see who's similar, who's different, and really support the team to understand each other better, to build that collaboration. Now, if the team has high searcher, to build the collaboration and help them understand each other, meaning and making a difference is important. Having really clear objectives as a team becomes very critical. regular feedback is also important. Spirit teams need a structure so that they can operate more effectively and to simplify and prioritize better. Teams that are highly creative, it is very much about getting them to problem solve and get them to have innovation think tanks. Expert teams definitely love training, mentoring, coaching, and spreading their knowledge. Builder teams need goals and targets and rewards. Director teams like responsibility, tend to take on a lot, and really need a very clear sense of direction and trajectory for the team. Star teams like to be highly visible. You really notice them in a business. They stand out because everybody knows that team. They love to be known for what they're doing, and they love visibility. Teams with high friend, and I've been working with several of those recently. They're very engaged. They love storytelling. They like involving each other. They're massively collaborative. And often you don't have an issue with cohesion with teams with a high friend motivator. And Defender has cropped up as a motivator that's been really important recently, because Defender's about safety and security. And I've noticed some teams that's really come onto the agenda. Psychological safety, how they feel supported, and what the team leader can do to allow everyone to feel safe. So again, you might look down this list and put in the chat box of the teams you're working with, which of these motivators do you think is least satisfied? Because when we measure teams' motivation, we look at what's most important, but we also look at how satisfied the team is and what might be missing. And again, that can give some real tangible scores for what to focus on and what to talk about, and how to address those elephants in the room. Because often when we're looking at that interconnection and the collaboration, there are sometimes a bit of dissonance between what drives one team member and what drives another. Someone asked me today, should all the team members have the same motivators as each other? And on one level, it's quite nice for people to be aligned around certain motivators. But equally, teams are stronger when they're diverse. So although you want some alignment, you do also want different team members with different motivators. But that can start creating some friction. This is an example of a senior team that I worked with, again, fairly recently. Now, their top motivator was spirit. They were a lot of free spirits, very entrepreneurial business. The senior team were very much about empowerment, and they were telling everybody else in the business, you can be empowered, you can set your own working structure, you can do what you want, work on times you want. They wanted everyone to feel safe, and they wanted to make a difference with the searcher, but it was all about empowerment. Now, the elephant in the room was that quite a few employees that were in this business weren't sure what their priorities were. They weren't sure of what their expectations were. And because the senior team was such a free spirit, autonomous team, they were going off in their own directions, but not communicating to the rest of the business. When they saw their motivation profile, it gave me the opportunity to help them understand that although freedom and autonomy was important to them, it was actually less important and a bit confusing to some of the people that reported into them. And often what you find is free spirits like to give empowerment, but the people that work for them need clear job descriptions and a clear understanding of what's expected. And this senior team weren't delivering that at that point. So it gave us a really clear focus on, you need to really give some expectations to your team. Otherwise, nobody feels free. So this can actually bring out some of those elephants in the room. And a team report gives lots of information about what motivators team members have in common, but it also talks about where there is a lack of motivation. Now, this is quite hard to see, but the bottom graph shows the shared motivator count of a team. So all those yellowy orange bars show how many people in the team have that motivator as an important motivator. But what's also useful as a coach is to see those red downward bars. This is where nobody has that motivator in their blend. Now, this particular team, as you can see, hardly anybody had star motivator in their blend. And it was a massive elephant in the room. The star is about recognition, respect, being noticed, being visible. And this particular team was not visible. They had no real reputation. People didn't really know what they did. They did great work, but nobody knew about them. They were hiding their light and their specialism under a bushel. And so the opportunity for me as a coach was to help them understand that actually it's a demotivator for lots of people on this team. This team is really not visible. And we actually looked at how can we focus on your team brand, focus on your team reputation. But rather than trying to make it a look at us, we're great egos and it's all about our star, their top motivator was searcher. So they wanted to make a difference. So I looked at this whole aspect of respect with them and social esteem and recognition and reputation. And I said, look, it's not about reputation for you as a team, but the more you build your visibility and the more you build your reputation, the greater difference you can make. So sometimes connecting a team's bottom motivator with their most important one will fire them up to do something. Now, this team was hugely ambitious and they really wanted to make a big difference in the world. And it suddenly sent a massive light bulb onto them that actually we're not going to make a difference unless we really recognize our star. We focus on our brand and we focus on our reputation. And that then gave me a big in to coach them around that. It was an elephant in the room, but we got it out. So we've talked about purpose, we've talked about that connection between everybody, and now I'm going to move on to belief and positive expectations. Now, there's some great resources on supporting belief. I love Shazad Shemaine's work on positive intelligence, which I often use with teams. But what's also really useful is a great book called Monetizing the Employee Experience. And again, I think this is going to be a hot topic for us coaches moving forward in the next few years, is team experience, employee experience is going to be super critical. There's lots of talk about the importance of the customer experience, but actually the customer's experience is a direct result of how the employees are feeling, how the team's feeling. So this is a great book that really looks at how do you engender belief in teams, how do you engender belief and confidence and motivation within employees, and therefore the direct impact that then has on the customers and the clients and the communities that the team and the organization serve. And it actually starts to put money on that and shows the return on investment. And the way we do it, and a big thread through this book, is mapping motivation. And so if we really think about building belief in teams, energy is super critical. And looking at, are we fully motivated to achieve our full potential? Do we own the goals and align with the business objectives? And to get that sweet spot of productivity in a team, building the environment and the working conditions by understanding motivational drivers and linking that with emotion and how everyone's feeling starts to build that huge sense of belief. Gallup finds that business units in the top quartile of the global engagement database are 17% more productive and 21% more profitable than those in the bottom quartile. So there are some real business benefits in building that whole sense of belief and engagement in teams. And I think partly where businesses really enjoy this and where teams start to track their progress is when they can feel that it's actually making a huge difference. And then the final thing I'd like to talk about as we go through this is thinking about how we measure this, the accountability piece, the results piece, the coherence, and how satisfied people are. So I've spoken about understanding your own motivators and how you can measure those, or the team leaders' motivators and the team. But what becomes really interesting is comparing different teams. Now, this is a business that we worked with a while ago, and the overall motivation of the organization ended up being about 78%. I was really keen to start moving them over to that 80%, which is my target. Now, we did a lot of work with the senior management team. And as you can see here, we got them well, they're the red bar, we got them well over to sort of 85% or just over motivation, which is really great for them. But we started looking at, you can compare the differences between the different team members and the different teams. This organisation that we work with was 71% motivated, and we can look at different quadrants of which employees are in which segment, and therefore how we can work with which teams to make the biggest difference as coaches. And also holding that accountability then becomes, it's one thing knowing what your motivators are, but let's put some actions in. So what I like to do with the teams I work with is we agree their motivators and we look at what the team's motivators are, and I get everyone to track their actions. So I've put my chart in here because I didn't want to share any confidential information of the teams I'm working with. But my top motivator, the searcher, I would literally put actions in about how I can make sure I'm adding value and making more of a difference. And then we track those, and then I can coach them, and their manager can coach team members in their one-to-ones and see how they're getting on. And just to show you, we can track the levels of motivation of people. So this is my motivation scores that I've been tracking since November 2019. And you can see how they go up and down depending on what's been going on. And it's useful for me to dive into that and look at what's caused that and understand that. And equally, we can track that for team members and have open discussions to how we support each other. So there's a huge amount of information here, and maybe you want to look at the slides after, but there are lots of motivation and reward strategies to really help teams thrive and look at what's going to make the biggest difference. So we've spoken about ambitious remit, interdependency, belief and accountability, and that thread going through it all is looking at mapping motivation. So I hope this webinar has given you some insights and some thoughts. And if you would like any more information, I'm very happy to stay, answer in the chat box, or speak at the outside of this to support you. My LinkedIn is Carol Gaskell, or carol@fullpotentialgroup.com. And there's a lot more information on this, and you can do a motivational map profile if you email me or you visit the website. Fullpotentialgroup.com. So I really hope that the teams you work with do thrive, and that you thrive and really enjoy this wonderful work that we're incredibly blessed to be able to do. Thank you.